I'm Kimberly Jolly from the Fat Quarter Shop FlossTube, and today I'm going to show you how you can turn a cross stitch into a very simple pillow. So if you're not a quilter or a sewist, I can show you all the steps on how to do it. So first, I stitched the Let Love Bloom cross stitch piece by Country Cottage Needleworks. I stitched that on 10 count Farmhouse. That is a bigger Aida cloth, and it's going to give you a bigger result. So it's really great for pillows. And when I stitched it, I used DMC and I used 6 strands. So it's super chunky because I wanted that chunky look on my pillow. Typically on 10 count Aida, you would use 4 strands of DMC, but this is how it looks with 6 strands. So to turn it into a pillow, what I'll be using today are a friction pin. I'm going to be using approximately a yard for the border and backing, a 1/4 yard for the binding. I've got some binding needles and binding clips. For sewing on my sewing machine today, I'm using RFO Color 2000, and I've got some embellishments here. I've got some Just Another Button Company white buttons and some white vintage trim, just in case I want to add some embellishments when I'm done, because I'm not really sure what I'm going to do yet. I've got my sewing machine, a rotary cutter, and a Creative Grits ruler. And the pillow that we're making today is going to finish at 16 inches. So I've got a 16-inch pillow, and let's get started. So to cut my pillow down, I am going to actually draw lines on my 10 count vintage cloth because I really want to have an even number of squares around the entire piece. So I've decided to do 6 squares. So I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I'm just going to draw a line on where I'm going to cut. A friction pin will disappear with heat later, but this will be in your seam, so you'll never see it. So I'm just using this as a line. I will use my ruler in a little bit, but this is a really good gauge so that I get an even look all the way around my piece. And whenever I'm working with cross stitch, this is how I cut it. By drawing a line on the square so it's just even all the way around. I'm afraid if I don't draw the line, then when I put the ruler there, I might put it in the wrong spot. So this just makes it really nice and even. And I like a little bit of cloth all the way around. You could do it shorter, you could do it bigger, you can do whatever, but I think this will look nice. 1, 2, 3, 4. So now I've got that line all the way around my piece, and I am going to go ahead and trim. Today we're using the Creative Grits ruler, and on the back it has a non-slip grip. And I'm going to put the line on the top line that I drew. It looks correct on the edge. And I'm going to trim. I'm going to do all 4 sides. And now I'm just using the line as a gauge, but I am lining this line up at the top so that when we have our square, we have an exact square. And so I'm not cutting directly on that drawn line. I'm just using it as a gauge. So now this is what we're going to work with to put into our beautiful pillow. So now I'm using this print for my border and backing. I'm going to cut 2 4-inch strips, and the first thing I'm going to do is even up this edge. So on the fold, I have put my Creative Grits ruler, and I've got the line here, and I'm going to trim. And then I'm going to rotate this gently so that that stays straight. I'm going to cut 2 4-inch strips. And then on the fold at the top, we're just going to cut that off because we won't be using that. And so that is going to give you 4 4-inch strips that you're going to use for the side and the top and bottom. So we'll set those aside. And for the back, we are going to cut a 22-inch wide piece. So I'm going to use my Creative Grids mat and just go across to 22 inches and cut. And then this is going to be 2 pieces of backing. So I'm going to cut on this fold area. And these are going to be the 2 pieces that you use to make your envelope back. So now we can start assembling our pillow. So our first step to the pillow is to add the sides. So I don't need this much. So what I'm going to do is just kind of trim it down. So we've trimmed our sides and we're going to put right sides together on one of the sides. And I'm going to use some Wonder Clips to keep the fabric in place when we're sewing instead of pins, because I don't want the pins to distort my Aida cloth. And so we've got right sides together. We're going to sew a 1/4 inch seam down the side. So let's go to our sewing machine. So to start, I have left my border fabric wider, and so I'm just going to start stitching on the fabric. I'm going to put my Aida on the bottom. And I have my machine at about a 2.5 stitch, so a much wider stitch than I would normally use. And I'm just going to do a 1/4 inch seam. So you can either use a 1/4 inch foot or you can use a line on your stitch plate. And I'm just going to go nice and slow and remove the Wonder Clips as I go. And I'm going to stitch past the end of the Aida. So we have stitched the right border, and I'm going to go ahead and add my left. And again, you're going to put your fabric's right sides together and clip with Wonder Clips. We'll go back to our sewing machine, and again, you're going to keep your quilt fabric on top and your Aida on the bottom. We're going to do the same exact thing where you start stitching on your fabric before your Aida. And now we're going to press. So now you can see your piece. Your border's looking really nice and pretty. And first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set my iron flat and use a little bit of steam right on this seam. That's called setting your seam. It's a really important step. So do that. That's going to kind of lock in your stitches. And then I'm going to finger press that open. And then put the iron right on the edge. Just nice and flat. And some people press on their cross stitch, some people don't, so you can do it either way. So again, I have set the seam and I'm going to just gently with my finger, I'm going to be pressing toward the border fabric. And you can just put your iron right on that seam and press it. You want it to be nice and flat. So that looks really nice and pretty. You don't want your fabric to be pressed like this, because then you're going to have like a duck pleat right here. So you want it to be really nice and flat. We're gonna set our iron aside. So now I need to trim my borders flush with my stitched piece. So I'm gonna turn this to the side, use my ruler, and I'm gonna use this line right on the seam, this line also, and then I am going to trim. And doing your borders like this gives you a really nice border where nothing waves and you don't have to worry about anything waving. So that's nice and straight. We'll do the same thing on the bottom. And I'm using the lines. And you can see that I have not serged the edge of this. Now, if you would like to, you definitely can. I just don't think it's necessary, but if you would like to, you definitely can. And now we're gonna add our top border. So we're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna use Wonder Clips and just clip all the way across the top. So I'm going to go ahead and put the clips here, and I am going to stitch this top border. Then I'm going to come back and stitch the bottom border, and I'll be right back with all of that done so we can trim our pillow top. So now our pillow top is all sewn together, and we just need to trim the edges. So I'm just going to trim, and again I'm using the lines on my ruler. And if you have to trim a little bit off, that looks really nice. So now we're going to see if it's square. So this is showing 16 1/4, and this is showing 16 1/2, and that's because when we stitched it, it wasn't completely square. So what I'm gonna do is just trim a tiny bit off of this side. It doesn't have to be perfectly square. I'm just gonna make it somewhat square. And so I will look, and now it is square. And it's a pillow, so it doesn't have to be perfect. So now let's have fun and embellish our pillow. So we've got some options. I've got some large vintage trim in the cloud color, and I've got some white buttons. And I guess the first thing we could do is just look how it would look with just buttons in the corner. I've got big buttons, small buttons, and you could always put 2 buttons on top of each other. Like that would be super cute. That's one option. You could put 2 buttons on top of each other. You could do rick-rack. And this is how I decide what I'm going to do, is just play. You could do some rick-rack just on the inside. And that seems to be kind of a little staunch or a little strong. So maybe we could do something like this. Like this, and then maybe we could do, let's see. You could do something like this. And then maybe, let's see how this looks. How this would look. And I have a ton of rick-rack here, so I have plenty to play with if I change my mind. So I could do something like this. And that to me looks super cute. You've got to envision that you're going to have binding on it. That looks cute. And then I'll probably come back and add 2 buttons in the corner so that they're like double buttons, and it gives it some texture. So I think that's what I'm going to do. Now you could do different colored buttons in the corners. You could do all kinds of things. You could leave it just like it is. You don't even have to embellish it. It's going to be super cute anyway. So I think what I'm going to do first is I'm going to sew these down because I'm going to follow this line. So let's go to the sewing machine and sew down these 2 rickracks. So before I started my pillow, I did a little tester piece to see what stitch length I liked, and I came up with 3.5. And I'm just going to be using this line as a guide, and I'm not going to glue it or pin it. I'm just going to freehand it. I will start with the rickrack off of my fabric just so I can trim that off later. And I'm just going to go really slow. I'm going to set my machine to the slowest setting, and I'm just going to guide it, and I'm keeping that stitch right in the center of the rickrack. And I'm doing a wider stitch since I think it looks better. And I'm just going really slow so it comes out really nice. And I changed to Aurifil color 2024, which is a bright white, so that it would match my rickrack. And I'm going to sew off the end. And here's how my stitches are looking. And we'll do the other side. And on Lori Holt's rickrack, there is a front and back, and so you can just see which one looks better to you, but this looks like the front to me. And that is looking super, super cute. So what I'm going to do is add the rickrack here. To do that, I'm going to draw some lines with a friction pen. Again, with friction pen, the ink on this pen will disappear later and you're going to cover it up. But I'm just going to draw lines. So I put the ruler on the edge of the Aida cloth, and then I'm just drawing lines down so I have something to follow when I add my rickrack. And so I'm going to just follow that down and do the same thing. So we're going to do the last one, and what I'm using is vintage trim, which is also rickrack. It's the same thing, it's just Lori calls hers vintage trim. So you can use vintage trim or rickrack. And this vintage trim and or rickrack is 1/2 inch wide if you want to use something similar. So now that we are done, I'm just going to do a gentle press all the way around. And then I'm going to clip the ends. And this is going to be encased with binding, so you don't need to put fray check on it or anything like that. I mean, if you want to, you definitely can. But I'm not going to because I don't think it needs it. So I'm just going to cut these ends off. And then I'm going to add some buttons. Okay, so from here, we can embellish the corners if you want to. I've got some Just Another Button Company smoothie pack, and that is how one button looks. You could stack buttons and do two, but I think that gets it's looking a little fat now that we've got rickrack down here, so I think I'm just gonna go with one button. But there's, you know, you can play around and just see what you think. So I think I'm gonna go with these bigger buttons and put them in the corner. And the Smoothie Pack is more of a flat button without a shine, and so that's why I like that. I'm going to just use some white DMC. I will just pull one strand off, and then I'm going to pull 3 strands. I'm going to make a loop, and I'm going to use a fatter needle, which is like a size 24. So I have made a loop at the bottom. I'm going to thread my tapestry needle. And then I'm going to just pull my needle up through the corner. Put the needle in one hole and back down the other hole. Place it how you might like it, and I think a diagonal where it's stitched a little bit diagonally will look good. So I'm going to go back down, come back through the back, pull it, and you've got this loop that you've made. You're going to put it in the loop. And I think that looks really nice just like it is without adding any more thread. So what I will do is come back through, create a loop, pull it through and knot it. Do that one more time so you've got 2 knots in the back, and then cut it. And that's how I'm going to do all 4 buttons. Now I have all my buttons put on and embellished just like I want. And remember, at home, you should embellish however you want. Just make it look cute to whatever decor you have in your house. Now for our back, in the beginning, we had cut one piece 22 inches by width of fabric, and then we cut on the fold. So now we have 2 pieces of fabric. So what we're gonna do is on the selvage, we're gonna make a fold. And we're going to press this. So you've got your selvage on one end, and you're just going to press this down. Make a really nice crease, and it'll all make sense in a little bit. So you've got that done. Now we're going to do the other piece the same way. Take the selvage, wrong sides together, and iron. Just want a really nice clean line right here. And this is not perfectly straight, and that's okay. Like if this is not lined up perfectly, that's fine. Okay. So now you have these 2 pieces, and you've got an open end here. So what you've got is the fold right here. So you're going to put the folds in the center and this on the outside. So you want to put your folds in the center. Put one on a line on your mat. So this is a 15-inch line. Just line it up. We're going to count 3 squares over. 1, 2, 3. And we're going to put this fold right on top of it. So on the back, you're going to have an overlap of 3 inches. So you've got this overlapped 3 inches. So 13.5 inches would be the very center of your pillow. So you'll take your pillow top, fold it in half, and lay it about at the 13.5-inch mark. It does not have to be perfect. That center line does not have to be perfect on your pillow. And so this is how I'm going to lay it out. And I'm going to trim all 4 sides so that the front and the back are the same exact size, and then we'll pin. So we're going to trim all 4 sides so that your backing is now the same size as your pillow top. So I'm going to pin before I move it. And again, I am using the lines on my ruler up here so that when I cut, I've got a straight 90-degree angle. And this is looking super cute. So we're going to do that all the way around. And when you're looking right here, you want to get a lot of pins right here so that when you're putting the basting down, that this envelope stays there. So where the fold is, you'll want to put a couple more pins than normal. And when you're pinning, just make sure you go through all of the layers. This is where that fold is, so I've got a couple more here. And so what this is your pillow. And you can see that now you have an envelope back to put your pillow in. But what we want to do now is baste 1/8 inch around to keep everything in place before we do the binding. So we're going to go to the sewing machine and just stitch all the way around the inside, just slightly from the edge, to keep all of the pieces in place. So I have my machine at about a 3.0 and I'm just going right along the edge. You want to make sure you get all your layers together, and this will make putting your binding on easier later. When you get to the edge, just pivot, and you can see my stitches, they're keeping everything together. Now we basted all the way around the edge, and you just want to make sure that everything looks correct on the back. Sometimes I've done it where this gets all out of wonk, and you can fix it before you put your binding on. And you can just put your pillow right in. But we're going to put binding on first. And before that, I like to, especially on a pillow, make sure that I've got 90-degree corners. So I'm just going to place this, and that corner looks really nice. This corner does not, It just needs a little bit trimmed off. And by doing your corners with a square ruler on the edge, you're gonna have a really nice point on the edge. Just wanna make sure this one has a little bit too much. And I've got nice corners, and now I'm gonna show you how you can put binding on. It's super easy, you just have to take it slow. So if you're a cross stitcher and you've never put binding on, I'm gonna show you all the steps. For a pillow, I like to do a really skinny binding. So we've got this small piece of fabric. I've got the fold at the bottom. I'm gonna take my ruler and on the fold, put the line on my ruler and trim. That way when you pull your fabric open, you're gonna have a straight line instead of a crooked line. I'll rotate this around. We're gonna cut two 2-inch strips. So I'll cut 2 inches first. And you just need to take the perimeter of your pillow plus about 10 inches. So we need 2 strips. Okay, so now you've got 2 2-inch strips. I'm gonna cut on one of them, cut the selvage off. I'm gonna line up the top right sides together. I'm gonna leave this and cut this off in a little bit. You're gonna draw a line from corner to corner. I'm using a friction pin, and we're gonna stitch directly on this line. And you can see how it's gonna look when you open it. And anytime you're doing it, before you stitch on the line, you can kind of cheat and make sure that it is going to be straight. So we're gonna go stitch that. So we stitch directly on that diagonal line. I'm gonna come back with my scissors and trim a 1/4 inch away approximately. So you're just gonna use some scissors and trim that away. And then I'm gonna press to one side. And then I'm going to press open. The reason you would put a diagonal seam on your binding is so that on your pillow you don't see a big bulk. You could always do a straight seam, it just might not show up as flat. So now we've got a big long piece of fabric. We're gonna put wrong sides together and line up the edges, and this is going to be your double fold binding. You're just gonna go along nice and slow until your entire strip is pressed together in half. So now we have our binding, and we're gonna put that around the edge of our pillow. What I like to do is start on the bottom. You can obviously start wherever you would like. I always just start on the bottom, and you're gonna put the edge that opens on the very edge of the pillow, and I'm gonna use a tail that's about 12 inches or so. So I'm just gonna leave a tail, and I'm just gonna start stitching. I'm gonna use about a 2.0 stitch length. I am going to back stitch when I start, and I'm gonna use a 1/4 inch foot. And I'm gonna show you at the sewing machine how you do all of the corners. So again, you're gonna put the raw edge on the raw edge, leave a tail, start stitching. And what I like to do is stitch a few stitches and back stitch. And then you're gonna keep stitching until you get close to the edge. Okay, now I'm going to make a mark a 1/4 inch away from the edge of the pillow top on the binding. I'm going to draw a line. I'm going to stitch directly to that line and leave my needle down and stop on that black mark. Again, that's a friction pin that will disappear, the ink will disappear with heat later. So I stitch directly to that line. I'm going to pivot, sew off the line in a diagonal, and then you will fold your fabric a 1/4 inch. It should make an exact line right here. So when you fold this on the diagonal, like this, it should be a perfect 45-degree line, and see how that makes a line. Now if it doesn't do that, your corner is going to look funny when you do it, so you'll want to redo, unpick your stitches and retry that. Now you're going to keep a finger there, and then you're going to pull your binding back, and at the very, very top have a fold. Put it under your machine, start at the edge, and start sewing. You're going to sew and do all of the corners the same way. Now I've gone around all of the edges and I'm getting close to where I started. I'm going to leave a gap about 6 inches open. So I'm going to go till about that much, and then I'm going to back stitch, and I'm going to show you how to join your tails. So now we have our tail. So you can see you have 2 ends. I'm going to just kind of find the center, pull one side over, doesn't matter which side. I'm going to pull that off and try to cut a straight line. And you've got this. Now, we originally cut our strips 2 inches. So whatever size binding you use, that's the math you're going to use. You're going to lay the other side on top and measure 2 inches to the left. So I've got 2 inches here. And I'm going to draw a line. And I'm going to trim that side straight. Okay, so I laid the right tail on top of the left tail that we already cut, measured 2 inches over, so you've got a 2-inch gap here, and we're going to cut. So now you have your little tails, and we're going to join them. And you're going to put them right sides together and pin. And this gets a little tricky because you don't have as much room to work with. So I'm going to put a lot of pins in place. And then you're going to draw a line from corner to corner, which is kind of hard to do now. But you're going to draw a line from corner to corner. If you're not sure if you've drawn it the right way, you can kind of go like this and you can see that it will work. So now we're going to stitch directly on this line with a really small 1.5 stitch length. Just stitch directly on this line. So we stitched directly on the line, and we, of course, on this whole project, we're using a friction pin because the ink will disappear when we iron. And I'm going to trim approximately a 1/4 inch away from the edge, and I am going to bring out my ironing board. So now you've got this seam right here, and what I'm going to do is press it open. So let me just do it with my finger first. And then bring the iron, press that seam flat, and open. So your seam is open. And then you will press down. Get it really nice and flat. And here I like to put in a couple of pins. So this is where your stitches started and stopped previously. You're going to start about a 1/2 inch before, stitch all the way down to about 1/2 inch past your previous stitches. So now I have the binding all the way around. What I like to do is press down my seams on all 4 sides. And then press out with your iron. Push your binding out. And now we're going to turn to the back. I'm going to use some binding clips, and I'm going to just clip these to the edge, and that is going to help keep all the fabric in place. And I'm going to hand stitch this binding down. And I'll show you that next. When you get to the corners, for each corner, I'm going to trim a triangle off so that you have less bulk. So I'm going to do that on every corner. And as far as putting the clips on, I just put the clips on, and I am going to miter that when I get to it. When I'm hand sewing, I don't worry about the miter when I'm putting this on. And you just want to make sure when you're clipping this that you clip on the other side of the stitches. And that's going to just take some of the bulk out. Okay, so I'm going to just use a 50 weight normal 100% cotton thread for my binding. I'm going to clip that, and I'm going to put a knot. I wrap it around my finger, twist and pull, and I have a knot. And then I'm going to use binding needles. I like to use the Clover 4973 black gold needles. And I generally like the longer one, so I'm going to pull the longer one out. I'm going to thread it. So now it's threaded. And I will start, it doesn't have to be anywhere particular, I just pick a spot. I'm going to put my needle in under the binding, and I'm going to go just past the machine stitches. So your machine stitches are here, I'm just going to go slightly past it, pull, and that knot is now hidden in your seam. And when I do my stitches, I do them about 1/8 to 1/4 inch away, and I go right on the other side of the machine stitch and then up, and I go right in the very edge of the fabric so that you don't see your stitches. And I pull pretty tight, and then I go right back down to where I was previously, and I keep going. And I will do that all the way until I get to a corner, and I'll show you how to do a corner. Okay, so when you get to the corner, you're going to stitch all the way until you hit your machine stitches. And then you're going to do an extra stitch right in that corner to secure it. And then I rotate. On the front, I should automatically have a miter. On the back, I'm just going to make a miter, hold it in place with my fingers, stitch again in that same spot, except pulling the next piece in from the next side, and just keep going. So you have a miter on the front and the back, and you've done a couple of extra stitches in the corner to keep it in place. And then you're just going to keep going. So now I'm getting towards the end, and you can see I've just got a little bit left, so I'm going to just keep going. And you can see as I'm doing binding, I really use my thumb to keep my fabric in place. I've got a little bit left. What I do is I just keep stitching until I've covered where you started. So I started about right here. So I'm just going to stitch past that. So I'm going to go about 2 stitches past where I started. And then I'm just going to take a bite where I just was, like a little stitch right where I just was. Go through, make a loop, and I knot it. Pull that through. And then just pull it really tight and cut it, and then your thread goes back in. And ta-da! Got your pillow. So now we have our pillow, and all we have to do is add our pillow form. So I've got a 16-inch pillow form, and I like to take the tag off. I know you're not supposed to, but I do. And then you just put your pillow in one side, put it in the other side, and it fits nice and perfect. It's nice and snug, and this is how you can turn a cross stitch into a pillow. And I would love for you to subscribe to the Fat Quarter Shop FlossTube channel so you can see more videos like this, and I'll see you next time.